listening to Give God 90, where we're not afraid of the tough biblical questions, because we will dig through the language, the culture, and the history to find the truth revealed in the words of our Creator.
Well, happy Monday, everyone. Yes, happy and Monday can go in the same sentence together. We're glad you have chosen to spend some time with us today, or let us spend some time with you, as the case may be. Yeah, I know I made a noise. Wasn't on purpose. My name's not Rush. And I'm nowhere near that professional. So anyway, don't know what the weather's like where you're at, but we're getting some snow. We're not supposed to get a tremendous amount where we are. Further north, they're going to get some. Probably.
They're already getting some.
They're already getting some. But yeah, we're enjoying a little bit of that Appalachian snowfall.
Yes.
If you like what you hear, don't forget those like and share buttons work really good. Do all the
bells,
things that help other people find us. All that good stuff. Doesn't cost you anything, but we don't usually make anything off of it either. It just helps other people find us. Yeah.
Ratings.
Something we've looked at before, and I didn't go into a great deal of detail about it. But we're going to look at what? Oh, the books. I didn't mention the books. I'm sorry, I didn't mention the books. I'm going to start letting you do the advertisements. Don't forget, the books are still available. That is what helps pay the bills. Tradition to Truth, God's Universe, God's Rules, and Inheriting Lies are still out there if you are interested. And you might want to pick up, well, actually after today, all three, if you haven't already. So, can I start now?
Yes, you may.
Okay. Something we've looked at before. I didn't get into some of the things that we're going to look at. I didn't go into a great deal of detail about it. But some people have the mistaken concept that Passover and the other biblical feast days are only for the Jewish people. After all, John 6:4 reads that Passover, a feast of the Jews, is not or was nigh. Now, many people read this and they assume that Passover is only for the Jews, and already we have some issues, right? First and foremost, it wasn't only the descendants of the tribe of Judah, okay, who were to celebrate Passover. That has led to a lot of, especially Christian doctrine, that refuses for some reason to acknowledge the other descendants of Abraham and Jacob. Jacob had 12 sons. However, because and through sin, time, punishment, and let's face it, just plain ignorance, the descendants of Judah became the majority of those who were regarded as the children of Abraham. That's why, we call it Jewish today, right? We don't call it Hebrew like we should, and I try to most of the time. But, the average person, if you think about Abraham, you think about being Jewish. But there were more than just Judah who were the sons. I don't know why that ever came about or how it came about, other than they were a very large group of people, and they were the ones who survived primarily. They weren't scattered like the others. Another issue with this particular verse is we know today, because we have access to the older manuscripts, and we give a lot of thanks to the people who were diligent in the study of those manuscripts. We know that this verse was added much, much later, probably in the 3rd or 4th century. This verse adds about a year to the life of Yeshua, the life of Jesus, and it's actually caused a lot more harm than we think. Now, I want to go down a rabbit trail, and yes, this is in my notes. I say that, and I get this look. I've heard people use the phrase, well, it's in the Bible, so it must be true. Well, the problem is what we call the New Testament has been altered from its original, especially the Gospel of John. John, for some reason, has become the most corrupted by those who recopied his letter. I guess it was an easy target. They added notes in the commentary, and then later, those notes became included as part of the letter by the people who were recopying it. Even though they had the note in the margin, they just added it to the text. I don't know why. It's just one of those things that happen. Now, some of the same people that say, well, if it's in the Bible, it must be true, there's some of the same people that refuse to study. Yes, I'm laughing at them. They take it for granted that just because somebody decided to edit it or translate it a certain way, that must be what it means. They just accept what they've been told. They consider it legitimate, but we actually know, and again, by really looking at the older manuscripts, we have things that have been added or changed, especially in the New Testament. A long time ago, 30-some years ago now, I was in a church and I heard an old man use the phrase, if the King James Bible was good enough for Jesus Christ, it's good enough for me. That attitude was wrong then, and it's wrong today. Now, I'm going to speculate a little bit here. Okay, and I'm going to say that Yeshua, Jesus, never read the King James Bible. Okay, he didn't carry it to Sunday school. He didn't carry it to Vacation Bible School. You're laughing, but I wish when I saw that poster, I would have had a camera back then, because 30 years ago we didn't have phones that we carried
in our back pocket all the time.
Right. But there was a poster put out by a very prominent Christian Vacation Bible School curriculum people, whatever you call those folks, that actually had a picture of Jesus carrying a King James Bible to Vacation Bible School. It never happened. Okay. That was a very long time before it was even translated into English. And I don't think that he would appreciate the way that so many people have corrupted or interpreted that particular Bible today. It just, I don't think, he would probably say, you think it says what? Right? Let me get back on track here. Because there's another passage that far too many don't understand, or they've taken it out of context. If you would like to read that particular passage.
Romans 3, verse 1 and 2. What advantage then hath the Jew, or what profit is there of circumcision? Much every way, chiefly because that unto them were committed the oracles of God. That is the King James Version. So do Jews have anything that other people do not have? Is there anything special about being circumcised? Yes, of course, there is in every way. The most important thing is God trusts the Jews with his teachings, and that is the International Children's Bible.
Okay, so I don't want anyone to think that I'm anti-King James, okay? I've said before that there is more reference material associated with the King James Version than any other English translation. And the problem is, part of the problem is we no longer speak the same English that was spoken when the King James was translated. And that means we have a hard time understanding it. It means we have a hard time figuring out what it's really saying if we're simply reading. Now, one of the best references that I know of, if you're going to study King James, is having Noah Webster's 1828 dictionary as a companion for it. Because then you get the definitions that were associated with those words at the time. The word translated as oracles is Strong's number, Greek 3051, if you're keeping score. Logion. And it's defined this way: divine references or utterances, and it can include the entire Old Testament. Okay, because the descendants of Judah were the remaining majority, they became responsible for maintaining and preserving what had been given to them. And we really do owe them a huge debt of gratitude for doing such an excellent job. It's just that simple. We read in history that the scribes went to great lengths to preserve exactly what was written in the Old Testament. The Jewish scribes would copy it letter for letter, go back and look at it again and again and again and again, and make sure that what they had matched the original. And yeah, there's a lot of legends that talk about how, if they made a mistake, they'd throw the whole scroll away. Well, they didn't do that. They would find ways to make corrections. However, when it comes to the letters written by Matthew, Mark, Luke, John, Paul, and the rest, what we consider the New Testament today, the people who were copying those letters weren't anywhere near as careful. Like I said, they put notes in the margins. Somebody else would come along and say, well, if he meant this, we should probably include it in the letter. Right? Now, there's a lot of problems with that. If I was going to write a letter to somebody and somebody else got hold of it and said, well, that's not really what he meant to say. He meant to say this. Well, maybe what I wrote really was what I intended to say. Especially if I'm giving somebody directions, right? You go down this road so far, and then you make a left-hand turn, and then you go down that road so far, you make a right-hand turn. Well, if that gets turned around, the person's going to be lost. Does that sound kind of familiar when we're talking about the way we do things biblically today? We've kind of gotten lost, haven't we? Now, we could say, and I will say, that the people who copied the letters of the New Testament were quite sloppy and careless with their copying. And to make matters worse, they included, what they thought the previous writer meant. And I'm going to say this, what's far worse is some of them, and we can see where this is, they simply included their own agenda onto the pages where they thought it would fit. It's that simple. And again, the old manuscript evidence proves it. We know most of what was added. We found it. We know where it's at. And Unfortunately, some of those things need to be changed, excuse me, to change the Christian culture of today. We need to get back to the original. And another short side note is the translation of the Hebrew manuscripts of the New Testament hopefully will be completed by the middle of next year, I think is what they're hoping for. So we may actually wind up with something that is more close to the original than we currently have. There's a big group of people working on that. Anyway, the idea that the feast days that are outlined in Leviticus 23 are only for the Jews has been around for a long time. But I want you to listen very carefully to the first two verses of Leviticus 23.
The Lord said to Moses, "Tell the people of Israel, you will announce the Lord's appointed feasts as holy meetings. These are my special feast."
Okay. Did you hear what the Creator said to Moses? These are my feasts. And nowhere, no place that I can find or that anybody else can find hint that our Creator gave his feasts to anybody else, not even to the Jewish people. They are his. He never relinquishes ownership of his feasts. In fact, the entire reason he gives us a calendar is so that we can track the days and times that we find in Genesis chapter 1. Go ahead and read that passage.
Then God said, "Let there be lights in the sky to separate day from night. Let these lights be used for signs, seasons, days, and years. They will be in the sky to give light to the earth." And it happened. Genesis chapter 1, verses 14 and 15.
Okay. And if I remember, I will include these passages in the comment section. If you have the Spreaker app, you can have access to that, and it's free, by the way. The word seasons here in Genesis 1:14 is the same word in Leviticus 23:2. But in 23:2, it's conjugated, my grammar's terrible today, isn't it? To reflect that they belong to the Creator who is speaking, so it becomes my feast, my appointed times. Now, this, of course, is in direct contrast to what we see in Isaiah chapter 1.
"Don't continue bringing me worthless sacrifices. I hate the incense you burn. I can't stand your new moons, your Sabbaths, and your other feast days. I can't stand the evil you do in holding your own meetings. I hate your new moon feasts and your other yearly feasts. They have become like heavy weights on me. I'm tired of carrying them. You will raise your arms in prayer to me, but I will refuse to look at you. Even if you say many prayers, I will not listen to you. It's because your hands are full of blood." Isaiah chapter 1, verses 13 through 15.
Okay, the difference is our Creator hates what we have corrupted to become the days when we were doing things that we should not have been doing. He hates the times we have appointed for ourselves. You need to remember that. It's important. He hates the times that we have appointed for ourselves. He hates the day we choose. I'm going to say that again. He hates the day we choose as a Sabbath. He hates the day we choose to worship other gods. He wants everybody who accepts his way to worship him his way. What a concept. You know, when you were young, if you were fortunate enough to have a family table where somebody had prepared a meal, did they expect you to come eat at the time it was ready? Or could you just come whenever you wanted? I know in my house, where I was growing up,
You better be at that table.
you better be at the table. Right. You see, the problem is when people read the corruptions that were added to the New Testament, or they read an incorrect translation, or they try to add their own agenda to what's written, we wind up exactly where the people were in Isaiah chapter 1. He hates it when we do things our way, but he really enjoys it when we do things his way. I'm going to let Maya read through some of the verses because I want you to understand how important these things are.
And by the seventh day, God had finished the work he had been doing. So on that day, he rested from his work. Then God blessed the seventh day and sacrificed it, because on that day he rested from all the work of creation that he accomplished. Genesis chapter 2, verse 2 and 3. Remember the Sabbath day by keeping it holy. 6 days you still labor and do all your work, but the seventh day is a Sabbath to the Lord your God, on which you must not do any work. Neither you, nor your son, nor your daughter, nor your manservant, nor your maidservant, or your livestock, nor your foreigner within your gates. For in 6 days the Lord made the heavens and the earth, and the sea and all that is in them. But on the seventh day he rested. Therefore the Lord blessed the Sabbath day and set it apart as holy. Exodus chapter 20, verses 8 through 11. And the Lord said to Moses, Tell the Israelites, surely you must keep my Sabbath, for this will be a sign between me and you for the generations to come, so that you may know that I am the Lord who sanctifies you. Exodus chapter 31, verses 12 and 13. For 6 days work may be done, but the seventh day is a Sabbath of the complete rest, a day of sacred assembly. You must not do any work. Wherever you live, it is a Sabbath to the Lord. Leviticus chapter 23, verse 3.
So, are you starting to see a pattern? I hope so, because these all point directly to the seventh day, not the first day. Yeah, and without that, without knowing the order of days, our timeline is corrupted, and the concept of the biblical timeline is corrupted. So, I need to clarify something here. I'm not saying that you can't worship anytime you choose, because worship is different than Sabbath or Shabbat. And hopefully you worship often and in everything that you do. The day of rest is given to us as a day to recuperate from the previous week, to remember all the blessings that the Creator has already given to us, and to look forward to what He's going to do for us in the days to come. The Sabbath is never intended to be a burden, but, it's kind of become just the opposite for some people. They try to make it something it's not, right? They try to do all the preparation and make sure that everything's finished before it begins. And by the time, everything's ready, it's no longer a joy, because you're so worn out from all the preparation. It's hard to enjoy it when you spend all week attempting to prepare for it. and I've seen this. I have talked to people about this. It's the last day of the week. It's time to relax. It's time, take take a hint from the Almighty himself. He spends all week creating. And then he says, you know what? I'm going to add one more day, and I'm just going to sit here and enjoy it. Why can't we do the same thing? After all, we're made in his image, right? More on that in a second. So here is an idea, your homework for the week, if you want to think about it like this. If you had a day, and I know a lot of people say, oh, I wish I could. If you had a day where you're able to spend time with your family, maybe your friends, without making any preparation or plans, what would it look like? Some people say, oh, when I retire, I can do that. Did you know retirement's not a biblical concept? You ever think about it that way? What would you be doing if you were simply to take a day when all you had to do was relax? I don't think people know how to relax anymore. I know we have a hard time some days because we look around and think, I should really be doing something worthwhile. You kind of feel guilty sometimes because, yeah, there's things you could be doing, but it's nothing usually that can't wait. Having a day every week just to wind down, chill out, shouldn't make you so worn out you can't enjoy it, right? When you think of how you might spend a day like that, try it and see what happens. The seventh day of the week, right? Not the first day, not a day of your choosing, as in Isaiah chapter 1, but the day of his choosing, a day he sets aside for us. I've said this before. It's not a Jewish thing. It's a God thing. It's not a people thing. It's a God thing. They're not Jewish feasts. They're the Creator's appointed times. And the first one that's laid out in Leviticus 23 is the weekly Sabbath. It's so important. It's mentioned often. Meyer just read a few of the passages I picked out that kind of really point to it. Living the way we're designed also means following his calendar. And I know that can be tricky at first. But begin with the first appointed day of Leviticus 23 and see what a difference a day makes. I was in a Bible, wasn't really a study. It was someone had come in and they were going to give their presentation. And somebody asked this fellow about the Sabbath. And he says, well, my Sabbath is on a Wednesday. My first thought was, when did you get to choose? When did you get to decide? Have you actually read Isaiah chapter 1? Do you know what it means? Have you seen it? Did you know what happened to the people who picked their own day? Now, I know a lot of folks are in employment where they don't have the opportunity to do so because of the culture we live in today. That's okay. You have another day. It's not the Creator's Sabbath. But think about it this way. If you have a job that requires you to work, number one, is it a work of service, or is it something that you might want to consider a problem? I know doctors and nurses, people in the medical field, first responders, they're there to serve. right? They're there to care for people. They're there to do things. Well, taking care of people is a form of worship. Taking care of people is something that we are to do. Now, building a boat, not so much. Farmers are there to take care of people, but even they have the opportunity most of the time, depending on the time of year, to say there's nothing that I can't put off for a day. Some things absolutely have to be done. I don't know anybody that would give a work animal a day off without feeding it or giving it water. But I have asked this question before. When it talks about not working on the Sabbath, does that mean that a mother can't nurse a child on the Sabbath? You need to consider these things. It's all part of it. Is what you do service, or is what you do really kind of unnecessary? And, think about, should I be doing something different? Some people don't have that opportunity. Some people do. That is something that you need to work out in fear and trembling, right? But when we look at Leviticus 23, if the entire world followed the Creator's calendar, what would it look like today? Would we be in the condition we're in today? Would we have the problems in the world we do today? Probably not. But we're stuck with what we got. But on the other hand, in your little part of the world, in your little group of friends, in your family, you can start to make some changes. But that's a choice you have to make too. I'm probably going to continue looking at some of these things because they are that important. Not the way we think of them today, but the way the Creator thinks of them, both when He spoke these words and today. So, until next time, which is Thursday, we wish you many, many blessings,
yes,
everyone.
we do.